per usual, everything on this channel is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as financial advice. Last Sunday, I was discussing the likelihood of a few things. One being Bitcoin's final, actual, real deal price move and the strength of the DXY. So unfortunately, what we had last week, if you were bullish, was DXY strength, and that basically rules the whole world. Whether you're talking about bonds, risk, inflation, the Fed, for me, it all sort of boils down to this one chart. Bonds, maybe a better overarching outlook, things like the 10-year, the 30-year. But in any event, on technicals, this is the DXY. This is a measure of the USD relative to a few other global currencies in the basket. Continues to look extremely strong because everything else looks extremely weak for the most part. Whether other countries are dealing with political problems, printing of their own, inflation of their own, Argentina discussing just using the US dollar outright as their currency, and strength in the dollar has helped rates and or kept rates where they are. The bond market potentially signaling that the Fed needs to keep going. So all that is to say, this is bad news for risk. And on the technicals, again, we're above the 200. We've got a cloud breakout, potentially a channel breakout, potentially a real deal inverted head and shoulders pattern. And if I pull up, I talked about this where we're just looking at an inverse of the DXY on the Bitcoin side of things, because the stronger DXY is, the weaker Bitcoin should be, the weaker certainly everything down the risk curve will be, the weaker S&P and the Qs will be. That's not going to change anything. And really what I'm worried about in the near term is, just like we had a very similar triple bottom explosion leading to DXY strength, we have that set up again. The difference here is I don't expect the Fed to raise another 5%, okay? But the technicals look very strong for DXY bullishness. Now we know in halving years, or post-halving, crypto in general, Bitcoin more so, has done best when DXY is weak. So in my book, like I said, a few different ways, if this is a pre-halving year, sell it off, sell it to 20, sell it to 15. What do I care, right? At some point, it's going to matter on the low end. But right now, our downside is 0 and our upside is 250 to 350K. So from my perspective, I'm not worried about it. When I get to the Bitcoin stuff, I'll talk about the cloud and how dead on that was. Still, it's amazing to me that the settings still work. So we're very much in a risk off stance across the board. Unfortunately, if you're bullish anything right now, it's not looking so hot. This is the S&P. Now, arguably on the cloud, we're at the Kijun. We could bounce here. I just don't. I'm not confident in anything this week, in anything in August or September, based on seasonality, and add on pre-election year seasonality and all of these other seasonality charts that are floating around. There's plenty of reasons to park your money in cash, get the yield, move on with your life. Don't stress over this, or DCA into Bitcoin. Those I think are the real two options here. Worst case for the S&P is this is a full-blown edge to edge and we get to 42. Now if that happens, that would be a 200-day moving average retest. It would be a full cloud retest, and certainly be bearish for Bitcoin. I think that's how we get to 20K from here if the S&P continues to sell off. The bullish case for the S&P is that we find support at the Kijun and we figure it out. I just do not like this parabolic stuff to the downside here, and you definitely see that on the Qs as well. And unlike the S&P, Qs are fully through the Kijun here on the cloud, already on their journey potentially to 336. So again, it's hard for crypto to be bullish if the legacy is falling apart, if the inflation fight isn't over, if the Fed may or may not be raising, if bonds are selling off, okay, even though that doesn't really make sense as far as why Bitcoin would be weak against that. But in the long run, I'm confident that Bitcoin will be okay. In the short term, not super bullish here whatsoever. Interesting though, even gold, below the daily cloud, within this pretty ugly range. At this point, it's we'll call it a multi-year range. Also not looking bullish in any regard to me at all, but maybe more bullish than Bitcoin here. I don't know. Just something like ancillary, where is the trade now? Is the trade nowhere? Is the trade just fully cash? Get your 5.25, whatever it is, and move on with your life? Because that's honestly what maybe makes the most sense to me, because even oil has overbought conditions. It certainly has the makings of this massive Adam and Eve that we've talked about for a couple of weeks now. But on low time frames, it's got this head and shoulders potential with pulling back to 75.5, let's say. In the cards, that's potentially a move. So as bullish as this is set up for, I just don't think it's going to get there this week, certainly. So everything across the board is just kind of a Debbie Downer against the dollar strength. Before I talk about Bitcoin, let me talk about today's video sponsor, Kraken Pro. Kraken Pro is a complete overhaul of the Kraken trading experience with a one-stop shop for advanced and professional traders. Kraken Pro enables efficient trading execution across multiple markets with a UI that allows for unique optimization tailored to your trading style. You can check out Kraken Pro with the link in the description of this video. And again, just kind of looking around, maybe this is PAXG against Bitcoin. Maybe that's the move. I don't know, honestly. Somebody in the comments of one of the videos mentioned this, in how well PAXG did against Bitcoin in 2022. Essentially because gold went nowhere, and gold was basically flat while Bitcoin was down significantly. Also interesting, the beginning of this chart, history, somewhat of a head and shoulders downtrend into oblivion, but once again, looking decently bullish on the cloud, because I can guarantee you nothing on any of these lists looks particularly tradable to me. There may be some low cap stuff. There's tons of people playing around with scam friend tech nonsense, but across the board right now, I'm not really seeing anything that super pops out to me. It is good news though that the Tether USD market has shored itself up back near $1 on the left axis here. And the 3 pool has healed significantly, and the USD Uniswap pool also well on its way to returning to normal. So in the moment, it looks as though whoever was trying to exit Tether has done so successfully. Maybe they're done, maybe they're not. But if they were looking to sell more Tether, this would be more heavily skewed towards Tether in the curve pool. The Tether price would be lower probably, and in the Uniswap pool it would be even more skewed towards Tether. So it's good news, silver lining for Bitcoin, for crypto. This was a big signal to me 2 weeks ago that there was likely not going to be a bullish move, because price of Tether acts very much like a VIX, a volatility index, a fear index. And if somebody's selling off Tether for whatever reason, we usually have a hard time being bullish. So as far as Bitcoin goes, at the end of the day, it's certainly not over. Over is, like I said on Twitter, over is sub 20. Then things get interesting. People calling for a revisit of each low here at 25, at 20, at 16. I mean, that's the logical, if we get completely turbo bear and the dollar just goes berserk and everything just continues to sell off. Sure. In the moment as we sit here, certainly at a interesting crossroads with this low and tight flag, which I'll get to in a second. Very much the opposite of a high and tight bullish flag. But from a pitchfork perspective, we're okay. It's fine, right? I mean, look how low we dropped during SVB stuff. We got plenty of room to the downside in that regard. We would still be in a bullish pitchfork, but on the lower half. So that's certainly not problematic. But what is problematic from a bullish perspective would be this bearish Kumo breakout on the cloud, which, almost to the day, it was dead on the money in suggesting that, hey, things are probably neutral at best, potentially quickly turning bearish. Get ready, right? Buckle up. So this certainly kept me out of margin positions. It kept me in cash to a percentage that I wanted to be in cash. And very much I rely on this to make trading decisions. Okay, it's not like I have a secret system with a paid group. It's free. Everybody knows what this is, right? So if you're bearish, what you don't want to see is a move back above the cloud. if you're bearish here, you want to see lower lows. I think that's obvious. Anything below 25, excellent if you're bearish, right? Because that suggests further weakness, probably further volume, further puke, further capitulation. Now, initially we did pretty well. We had a nice little wick there, but couldn't break above it. So that to me suggests weakness. We had a GBTC suit that didn't get resolved yet. It had a potential for getting resolved on Friday. We had the ETH ETF futures news, which sure, people saying, this is emblematic of the SEC not declaring it a security, whatever. I don't really care. But obviously we have the BlackRock stuff still looming. So that's for all the marbles, that one. And they delayed those decisions. So we didn't have any news necessarily either to help us against the dollar strength. So still bearish on the cloud. Below every single MA that's important in my world, below the yearly pivot. So we're below the 50, we're below the 20 week, we're below the 200 week, and we're below the 200 day. So unlike SVB, where we bounced on a bunch of MAs, this not bullish, right? So if you are bearish, what you don't want to see, again, is a regain of any of these levels, okay? If you're bearish, you want to see us just poke lower, break 25. And the alligator fractal stuff is telling you that. If you're bearish looking for shorts, it's saying, look, anything lower here, fair game. Clearly, we're already bearish. And even before this broke, this was in no way signaling, hey, trader, it's a good time to go long. We're making highs on fractals. We're crushing the alligator higher. None of that. So even this system had a nice tip-off period, let's say, that things were bearish. So again, if you're bearish, you want lows. If you're bullish, you want regain of these MAs. What I'm really worried about in the near term is this, bear flag pennant, low and tight flag, whatever you want to call it. This was the version in 2018 that helped spill us lower. Again, it's just saying, look, there's not enough bid here to bring us back to previous prices. That represents a new momentum where previously there was none. And for me, the most likely course of action is down. Here's another one in 2022. Took a few more days than a week, to get there, but eventually we went lower. So this is what we don't want to see if we're bullish. And ultimately, if we use a high and a low, we measure that out on the fibs. Again, 20 is not an impossibility if things get turbo bearish on legacy, especially. If Dixie's bullish and S&P is bearish, watch out, okay? Because this is in a very vulnerable state and is not going to just sit here flat. It's not going to retrace up. It's going to get crushed. That's just what's going to happen. So you definitely don't want to be surprised by that if and when that does happen. And that would be, out of the pitchfork. But I guess we'll deal with that when the day comes. Another sort of bearish suggestion would be pushing below this weekly B band after consolidating. We're the lowest volatility ever, tightest weekly B bands ever. I've said for a couple weeks I didn't really believe this thing was going to break up based on price structure, even though we were consolidating above the 20-week. So this to me confirms the likelihood again of further downside. I'm not saying it's another 80% move or anything, but look, anytime we consolidate, B bands contract, we break out, B bands expand. That typically is the direction. So barring some miracle, a miracle being, some BlackRock announcement or something, definitely not bullish. Again, August, September. there's so many reasons not to be expecting some miracle here that it's easier to be apathetic and just let it roll over because it doesn't matter, right? At least in the near term. This is the power law corridor. I'll zoom out on this in a second, but it's using some old highs to project kind of a logarithmic growth curve. And we're well within where we've been historically during pre-halving years, not unexpected to show continued weakness for many, many months, right? And we can point to on-chain activity, and you can go as bearish as you want because there's plenty of things to look at. I just don't think it matters at the end of the day. If we start crushing 20 and there's a risk to go to 15, then maybe it matters. But in the near term, I just don't see a reason to care that we're lower, especially with everything going on, rates, regulations, lack of inflows. This is the 2-year moving average multiplier didn't quite get above the 2-year moving average yet. And based on having, again, nothing crazy. So I don't hate where we stand here. Just allows me to DCA more. Don't mind it at all. This is another bullish potential. This would be a hidden bullish divergence. Lower low on RSI, higher low on price. So far, this is nullified, invalidated if price makes a lower low below 25K, below the recent local low. The reason this is a hidden bullish divergence is because it suggests that despite momentum just going basically to mega lows not seen since March 2020, price has not gone lower yet. So although there was a swift sell-off, not as low as the last one, and this is something we've seen historically, 2017 in that run-up, I talked about that last week, but so far it's holding. So if you're bullish, you definitely want to see that continue to hold. As far as the Bitcoin weekly cloud, again, no surprises to me. The structure just wasn't there. It didn't look like it was ready to go. And we're below the cloud or below the Tenkin, potentially even ready for that, 22, 23 on the weekly. So let it have its temper tantrum, let it do its thing. I'm not in any rush, certainly. I'd rather see the TK lines get much tighter, deeper into the year. September's a terrible month. So again, I just, doesn't matter to me. Nobody's here. Look at the view counts, look at the impressions on anybody making anything crypto related. And it's just god awful right now. Dominance fell below 50, but it's in weekly cloud territory. It's continuing reversal territory. They're also adjusting this slightly on TradingView side, so it's hard to really know and compare the current dominance to previous, but you'd expect alts to continue to sell off more. ETH had a bigger structure from mid 2022, potentially break to the downside. Not a ton of volume here, so there is some copium that this isn't actually a bearish breakdown of a bullish pattern, but it wasn't a good sign that we went all the way to the edge almost on this thing, and it definitely wasn't a good sign that we had that triple top type structure that I talked about all over the place. There is a potential, much like Bitcoin, where there is a world where this turns out to be a hidden bullish divergence if that low holds. So I'm not going to long this on that, but it's there, so if we're back above 1850, then we can talk. But I don't really think any futures ETF approval, I don't think anybody cares at this point. People want to see flows, not just announcements. That's just my opinion. This was the 4-hour head and shoulders. And if anything, it's a lesson in just fading bogus garbage news like the Ripple stuff. And anytime we make continuous lower highs, the pattern is still valid. Definitely went much lower. And because I think ETH is generally just leveraged nonstop, ETH tends to push past the expected zones and just goes for like the 2618, for example. You could argue here on ETH some sort of tiny mini in ascending triangle on the 4-hour, but I wouldn't get super bullish on this just yet, personally. But we get back above 17, maybe. We get this, multi-day pattern forming where we try to stab down, reject, then we can say, yeah, okay, maybe we're bullish, but it's just way too early to even start to think about that. ETH BTC was aided in the announcement of ETH futures ETF approval, in my opinion. But again, this chart, not exactly super happy, looks neutral at best, continues to hold within a bearish channel, continues to hold within this parabolic move to the downside. So I don't see a lot of bullishness even on this chart. And then lastly, the alt stuff continues to make a move within the range, nothing too exciting. I wouldn't expect alts to just broadly pop off here. I don't even think there's any alt that's doing super, super well that isn't just completely manipulated pump and dump game. So with all that being said, keep that in mind and don't lose your shirt. Your goal here is to be at the table as long as possible, get many shots on goal as possible without getting carried off the ice. That's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.